Good morning or good evening or afternoon whenever you're looking back at these videos. So this is going to be broken up. We had a lot go on during week one. So your very first week of school. So I'm going to go back. I do have these notes uploaded in our Schoology page. So if we go to Schoology and we go to English section 2, which is what 7th grade's in, your notes are going to be right here in the spider. So I go and click on that right now. I'm going to see this last week's notes. You'll start to see this week's notes come up because I will have those posted after tomorrow's Google Meets. But this is your week one notes, and we went over all last week. We went over story elements, poetry, identity, and figurative language. There were some other items that were hits in those lessons, but they're going to be continuous on our learning path. So we're going to see those come up a lot more often. Okay, so let's get started. So our first lesson that we went over was called Story Elements in 7th grade. So we looked at a little story called 7th grade. We had some vocab, and these vocab, once we've used it, I won't put it back on. If it's a brand new vocab, I'll put it on, but if we've already had it, I will not post it. So keeping up with your vocab is important. So our first vocab word is character. It's an imaginary person, animal, or creature within a literary work. Remember that literary work means text, so story or poem. Conflict, a struggle between opposing forces or characters. It's also known as the problem of your story. There are four types of conflicts. Um, when you were sixth graders or fifth graders, you probably learned about character versus self, and that's when you have a problem with another character. Um, character versus character. That's a problem with another character. Character versus self is that problem that's internal, it's with you. So if you found somebody's money on the floor and you didn't know whose it was, but you want to keep it or do you turn it in, that's character versus self type of problem. Then you have character versus nature. It's when you have to like battle something in nature, like a hurricane, a tornado, a fire, a wild animal. That's character versus nature. Then you have character versus society. That is a tricky one. As seventh graders, we aren't normally in an unjust matter. Um, Racism and discrimination, I always get tongue tied on that word, are forms of character versus society. Those are unjust scenarios. As students, the word bullying is an unjustified matter. So if you are seeing that bullying happen or you are the bully, you are creating a character versus society situation. Um, and so that's a problem. That's a conflict. And there are four: character versus character, character versus self, character versus nature, and character versus society. Then you have element. You're going to hear that word a lot. Element is an essential part of something. We have elements in all kinds of things in reading. Interact, because we're starting with a story and we're talking about story elements, characters are constantly interacting, especially when they're dealing with a problem. So interact is to have an effect on something or someone else. Plot, the events and motivations that structure a story. Setting, the time, period, place, and society where the story happens. So you'll always see your vocab first and then your instruction. I took all the instruction, which are the lessons, and I created these notes. You're going to see me use this symbol right here sometimes as a way to shorten things up. It means and. But every lesson has a question. So our first lesson, the question was, how does the setting of the story influence a character's feelings and actions? When we do that, we have to think about what our character's expectations are. And there were two types of expectations. You have your internal expectations, which are behaviors and the actions people expect from themselves. So an example is being better at something, earning money, being a star in a play. Those are internal expectation because you want that for yourself. Okay? External expectations are how other people expect them to behave or act. So, for example, I, as your teacher, expect you to do your assignments. Okay. Your parents expect you to clean your room. Another example of an external expectation is assuming something. When we assume, that's an external expectation. And then when we expect something like a reward, that's an external expectation. Those expectations that we have can motivate us as characters, as people, to act or behave a certain way. And if you have me for digital citizenship, these words you've heard before. Now, that word element that we had, it's an essential part of something. Well, stories have elements, and they have basic elements. For example, we can have a story without a character. Okay, and a character is a person, animal, imaginary creature who takes part in the action of your story. Um, your character can be your protagonist, which is your main character. I like to call those characters your hero of your story. Another word that you may remember is antagonist. That's your villain, your bad guy of your story. There's even called minor characters, and we'll get into that when we break down characters later on. Then you have setting. So setting is your time, place, and society where the story happens. It's revealed by how your characters interact with it. They either talk or dress towards their setting. A setting can create a mood in your story, and then settings may affect other characters as well. I put these two together because they go hand in hand. Your conflict goes with your plot. So the plot is a is a set of character motivations and events that develop a story. So this is in a sequence, and it's based on your character's motivation and events that help develop your story. Then you have conflict. It's a struggle between opposing forces or your characters. So conflict can motivate your characters, and conflict can draw events together in the plot. Okay, which then breaks us down to the plot structure. And I went over this with 8th grade, and it's the same thing if you had me for 6th grade, your teacher may have gone over this. Your Edgenuity teacher did a mountain, at least that's what I would call it. I also did the mountain in 6th grade. I've done like what would be a hill or a roller coaster. Um, but a plot is made up of sequence of events. You're putting things in order. So you start with your exposition, your rising action, your climax, your falling action, and your resolution. So of course, being at the beginning of this hill or this roller coaster is your exposition. So it's your beginning. It introduces your character, setting, and the conflict. Okay. Your rising action, it's rising up to this point. So your rising action is your middle. It's the events in a sequence that develop your conflict. So this rising action is starting to bring together your conflict. So we're starting to understand the problem our character is facing. Your climax is that turning point, and I teach my students that a climax is that OMG moment. Someone either dies, uh, there's a battle. Those are examples of that OMG moment. It's normally where your character has to make a decision. Your falling action. This happens after your climax, and I put in parentheses main events because everybody wants to list everything that happened after your climax, and that's not necessarily your falling action. Your following action are those main events that help resolve your conflict. So they're the main events that are helping to find the solution to your conflict, which then brings us to the resolution. So in the word resolution, we have this word solution. Okay, it's at the end of your plot. It's the fate of your characters. So it's near the end of your story. It ties up the plot's loose ends. It hints at what comes next for your characters. It describes how the conflict was resolved. And it doesn't always have to be happy, it can be sad and traumatic. So, resolutions are not always happy. They're not. They can be sad, traumatic. Okay? And that was our first portion. And that goes back to our lesson called Story Elements in 7th grade. I'm going to pause it here for this video. That way you can keep track of it in case you are working unit by unit to get caught up. But these notes are literally in the blue on your week 1. And I hope that helped. Trying to figure out how to end the video from my hover cam is kind of questionable. Well, oh, okay. I found the stop button. I hope this helped. If you need to go on to the next portion, which is for the poetry of identity, it'll be in the pink notes, and I will have that video up next. Bye.